So Elizabeth, should we stand and
In order.
As you do.
Thanks, John.
Thank you. My ID.
I've been saying pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. First, I'm gonna ask you. Oh, we don't have any.
Any call the roll,
Oh, well, then I'll ask Christie to call.
please? Trustee Cook,
I'm here.
Vice President Dom,
Here.
Treasurer Fritz,
Here.
Secretary Thomas. Here. Trustee Gayton. Trustee Zimmerman
Present.
and Trustee Everard.
Here.
Okay. Public comments. Is there anyone in the audience or on Zoom that would like to?
There is no one.
Okay. I think we're gonna go to the presentations. And, Ed, I believe that part of that first.
So the board probably remembers once a year, we do a compilation report of all the activities, or the majority of them that have occurred in the Land Preservation and Natural Resource Department. You have a copy of that, which is the full report with your packet. And I believe we put an updated version in there today with some minor corrections on it, but some figures. And what I tried to pull out for this presentation are just some highlights from that report. So there's more information if you'd like to peruse it at your leisure. And if a particular area interests you, this report is a compilation of yearly reports from all the different areas within natural resources. So if you're interested in plants, we can pull that full report for you, or animals, that full report, or things like that. So next slide, please.
Can I ask you about the Bobcat? Was that
Yeah.
one of ours?
It is one of ours,
Oh, wow.
and I used it as the entrance slide because we'll actually have a picture of it later on in the flex, so to speak. So this has been an interesting year for natural resources. At the end of 2022, Brad Woodson retired after 30 some years, and the division took an opportunity to step back a bit, take a look at some of the changes we've been contemplating, and we brought those forward to the board in early 2023. So we've gone through a reorganization, the first one in 10 years, and it's really a reflection of how things have changed within the organization, responsibilities within the division, and the amount of land that the district manages. So I won't belabor the details of that, other than to say that we split our natural resource manager job into two areas, a restoration ecology manager and a conservation ecology manager. So one of those managers is really taking care of the science aspect end of the division's work, and the other is taking care of the land management. Next slide, please. Last year, I reported on how COVID had affected our work in the field. And thankfully, we don't have that situation this year. But what we are dealing with is really a change in the nature of work. And I put this slide up because remote work has come to the district. And so remote work has proved very valuable in a lot of ways. It's allowed staff to flex their time, especially when they have to do reports and scientific analysis. But it also brings with it the need to have to balance when you have everyone in the office and when you have everyone in the field and when you have some folks working remotely. So I don't think it's the last change we'll see in terms of the nature of work, but it's one that we have put into place here at the district and one that we're managing, I think, to the benefit of the whole agency. To begin with, and I like to set this as the foundation, our work is predicated on approved district policy called the Natural Ecosystem Management Policy. This policy came into being in the mid-1980s as the district realized that it needed to begin to manage its holdings in a little bit more direct way. And it was recently updated by the board in 2021. But it states basically that the primary goal of our management efforts will be to maintain and reconstruct the best possible approximations of native communities by restoring ecological processes, structure, and composition. And I think it's important to understand what that means because sometimes there is a misunderstanding of what the district is trying to do on its lands is place every plant and every animal back where it might have been in 1830 when settlement began. And that's not the case at all. What we're trying to do is make sure that those systems have the same type of ecological forces that they evolved in originally available to them. So that would be things like natural hydrology, like prescription burning, like the interaction between plants and animals. And we'll see that in a very direct way when we talk about bison a little later. So that's the foundation block for our work. Next. We also work with a lot of partners in McHenry County, and we work with them in a variety of ways. We work with them in land protection. We also work with them on land management, and we work with them in education and management and about land preservation. These are really some of our major partners here, and I just wanted to call them up. So you might be aware of them: the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, through the Habitat National Wildlife Refuge, the IDNR, which maintains a couple of state parks in the east end of the county and some scattered sites in other parts of the county. The Nature Preserves Commission, which works with private land agencies to dedicate nature preserves and manage it. Of course, there's us. The Land Conservancy of McHenry County, which works often with private holdings and those that tend to be a little bit smaller, although they have some big holdings. Open lands, and the Conservation Fund, both of which serve as typically interim buyers and holders. So if there's a high quality piece of land that's for sale on the market, and a public agency like ours or the state or the Fish and Wildlife Service can't move on it right away, these two organizations will come in, purchase, hold, and then resell it to the public agency. So we work with all of these partners and more on a weekly basis throughout the year. So I'll talk first about our land protection efforts, and we actually had a longer presentation on this, so about a month or two ago, so I won't talk very much about it. But we concentrate since the end of the spend out of the 2007 bonds on really moving land protection forward in a couple of ways. And that is by using grants and bequests, by working with conservation buyers or private individuals who want to preserve land, easements. We have very diverse partnerships. And we concentrate really on the most strategic parcels for the district. One of the ways that we have been able to actually move land protection forward without purchasing land is the district has a wealth of equipment and technical know-how. And often when other organizations will go for a land protection grant, it will include a component of land management. And the district is able to partner as a land management agency with know-how and sometimes by sharing management, especially if it's adjoining our sites. And that helps provide strength to those grant applications that other organizations are doing. Just to kind of give you an idea of what you'll see delineated here is the 10 or the 20 lowest years of land protection in terms of acreage that the district has had. And if you look at the top, where it's in green and orange is 2022, where we preserved 49 acres, you'll see that really some of the smallest years in terms of acreage preserved have been over the past half decade. Land protection has gone forward, it's just not gone forward all the time under the district's auspices. So if you look at it as a whole picture, it's a good picture. If you look at it specifically as to what we've accomplished individually as an organization, it's much smaller And very much akin to the district in its very early years in the 80s and 90s. Next slide. This is the parcel we were able to preserve in 2022, the Hubert track at Pioneer Fen. You know, call out Val on this. He really worked very, very hard on it. We wound up with a partial donation from the family. The McHenry County Conservation Foundation chipped in some of the money that was required for our share of a grant with Illinois Clean Energy Foundation, and we were able to preserve this piece of oak woods and wetlands. Next. But our other partners have been active, and in 2022, Open Lands closed on what they call the Oak Ford Treebrook parcel, which adjoins by Strickey Prairie. And it's an area of former wetlands and old nursery stock. The district bought a very similar parcel like this just north of it back in about 2005. And once we restored the prairie and those old, very poor agricultural fields, they rarely produced a good crop. We had the federally threatened prairie white fringed orchid come up. So we're expecting that the same seed bank is in this parcel because it lies so close to that one. Thanks. Preserving land is really the first step in what becomes a long and continual process related to how the district's holding and real estate interests interact with everything from proposed developments to private individuals that are looking for permits. So this year there were 156 in 2022, I should say, 156 land related issues that were analyzed by staff, and some solution what came about as a result of that analysis. We had 4 intergovernmental agreements, 41 permits, and typically that could be something like the need to do pipeline maintenance where it crosses through district property, 106 miscellaneous land issues, and 5 threats. And threats are where we know something is going to occur on an adjoining piece of property or on a request to do something on our property that may negatively impact district holdings. The whole staff works on these, but typically these are the things that Val loves because they're so complicated, and they're never 2 that are the same. So he gets the lion's share of that. We're also very active in the field throughout most of the growing season, and so we work with inventory of just about everything that lives on district sites. And we have a very extensive database. I put this up here this year because this year we cleared the 1 million mark, or the number of individual living things that we've analyzed over the past 50 years. So that could be everything from fish to fungi to lichens to butterflies. So we've got over 9,000 surveys. They cover 659 individual species and over 1 million individuals. So McHenry County is a very well-studied county, probably one of the best in the Midwest, and probably the most studied in all of Illinois. So we have a really good database to work from when we make our land management decisions. Next.
Can I ask a question to show my ignorance? Are herps reptiles?
Yes, herbs cover reptiles and amphibians. So that you don't have to write out reptiles and amphibians every time you do it. So we'll talk a little bit about monitoring of plants from our plant ecology area. And one of the things that we have done on a consistent basis for many, many years is monitor rare plants. These are plants that our populations are either threatened, endangered, or heading in that direction. And we do that with a regional partnership that began way back before 2000. It's called Plants of Concern, and the monitoring goes on across the whole region on forest preserves and private land and conservation district land, and all that data is pulled together so you can see regional trends. And what we've been able to do with that, you can see the number of species that we monitored, the number of sites that were on there, and subpopulations where you may have a population of a plant in one part of the site and the same plant population in a different part of the site, so they're referred to as subpopulations. And what we're interested in knowing is how are they doing. And so you can see that 17% of them are stable, 24% are increasing. Null means we don't have enough data for a trend yet. and there are 26% that are decreasing. And so we utilize that knowledge to be able to come up with individual recovery plans for the populations that are decreasing. Some of them are decreasing for reasons we have no control over. There is a milkweed that grows only in the Midwest. It's called woolly milkweed. No place else in the world. There are less than 100 populations. There are 2 on district sites, and they have very serious genetic and breeding problems. And there's only so much we can do with that, a population like that. Others, we wind up protecting a piece of land. That population has been managed for decades, and so it takes a while to get that recovery process underway. We also do a lot of work with different animal species, and I'll talk about 2 that we have been working on for the last couple of years, and really 2022 helped us move forward. The mottled sculpin is a fish you would not stuff and mount on your wall. It's about 1 inch long, but it only lives in very cold water streams. And so one of the last places in the state where there are decent populations is McHenry County, because we have a lot of cold water streams. And so our wildlife ecologist is working with the state to develop a reintroduction program for mottled sculpins. So our goal is to be able to take them from streams that have them, that the district owns, into streams that we've restored. For example, on a School Springs mitigation project, we've restored over 4,000 feet of the small cold headwater streams that this fish loves. There are no sculpins in there because that was really a very deep drainage ditch for about 80 years. So our hope is that eventually we'll be able to put together a plan with the state's help and be able to relocate these species into new areas so that all the eggs aren't in a small number of baskets, so to speak. Similarly with freshwater mussels, which don't seem like particularly interesting species, but they really are great indicators of how clean the water is. And on a lot of the streams that we worked with over the past 50 years, water quality is improving. And so populations of some of these species that were very small and isolated in good stream stretches can be reintroduced into other stream stretches. The Nipperson, for example, has had 7.5 miles of the stream restored to good conditions. So we're now working through a grant funded by the Conservation Foundation, MCCF, and DuPage County Forest Preserve to actually raise these mussels inside in a very complicated breeding system that they have there. It's the only one of its type in this part of the Midwest. So the gravid females are taken from McHenry County streams. They're taken down to DuPage. The glaucoidea, which are the small babies of mussels, are removed. And then they are raised there, and the donor females are returned back to McHenry County streams. So that's what they look like. It's called the elk toe mussel, because if you look at it from the head on, it looks like an elk footprint. And those are the babies, which are like about the size of a pinhead right now. So last I heard, we had several thousand that were being grown down there, and the Conservation Foundation funded that. My understanding is they're going to be moving them outside into the pond soon, and then they'll be picked up again and brought back to McHenry County for release. So those are 2 of the projects we worked on in 2023. We had some unusual animal occurrences in 2022, and we usually have a couple strange ones every year. Trumpeter swans back in the 1960s and 70s were down to 400 individuals across the whole United States. And they've made an amazing comeback over the past 60 years. They're very large swans. They're the biggest swan in North America. And they're not supposed to nest in Illinois anymore. They nest further north and further west because it's more wilderness-like area. But we had one nested extra marsh successfully. So it's probably the first trumpeter swan to nest in McHenry County since the mid-19th century. And there is a picture of the swans with the young. So that was a kind of a really neat thing to have happen this year. Over on the right is a trail cam that we had up by one of our hunters at High Point, and it caught a bobcat on that trail cam. We caught another bobcat on a different site, not too far away, but far enough that it may not be the same individual a couple of weeks later. So we think of bobcats as, you know, they're predators, but they're fairly small and they're very secretive. So this is really one of the only ways to kind of know they're there. We've had what we call milkman reports for years. You know, somebody who's out very early in the morning, like the milkman used to be dropping off milk. And they will have those reports that say, I'm pretty sure I saw a bobcat. But this is actual on film proof. So we know that they are operating in McHenry County. We do a lot of research on district land, and I said earlier that there's very complex interactions between plants and animals. And when we do restoration based on our policy, that's what we're trying to restore, are the relationships and the functions. And the ecosystem knows what to do if it has those things to work with. So as everyone knows, we have a bison grazing project at Pleasant Valley, and we are studying side by side the impacts of how the bison and cattle graze differently in pastures, and how do grassland birds respond to that. And we're particularly interested in grassland birds because their populations have declined about 95% in Illinois since 1900. And bobolinks are one of the hardest hit. That's the bird in the corner. We know they're grassland birds because they sing territorially while they fly. So they don't perch and sing their territory songs. They fly up and hover and sing their songs. And that is a beast that did not develop with trees around. And what we found this year is that bison have created just the right kind of structure for grassland birds. And the bobolinks have exploded into areas that they weren't before, but they're in areas that the bison are grazing. So we know that that complex interaction between grazing, vegetation, and birds is something that we think we're on the right track of. Next. We have had 3 very bad burn seasons, beginning in 2019 when we had wet weather in the fall. 2020, we didn't burn at all because of COVID. 2021, we had bad weather and COVID return. So we've had abbreviated burn seasons for the past 3 years. But we still managed to burn about 1,500 acres each year. And this in 2022, that was on 39 different sites. Our goal is to burn 3,000. And that's what we are able to do typically in a good year. So we're still pretty close to it because we have 2 burn seasons, but the weather is helping. Yes.
On average, what is the time sequence between burns? Is it 2 years, 5 years?
We try to do less than three years or less, but typically because of equipment, personnel, and the weather, it's really stretches into 4 years, sometimes 5. Although if you get a really good burn in under the right conditions, that kind of makes up for that lag.
What type of areas do you burn?
Pardon me?
What type of areas do you burn? Just prairie areas?
No, we burn just about anything that will burn. So we burn oak woodlands, we burn wetlands, and we burn prairies. And one reason that happens is all of them burn historically, but it's much safer to do a larger area with, say, fire breaks that will encompass a variety of natural communities. And the fire kind of sorts itself out based on how wet the material is, how low the ground is, how dry are the leaves in the woods. So what you get is typically you don't get a complete burn. It'll be more intense in one area, less intense in another. And that mimics probably what the original fire cycle was. It wasn't 100% hot burns all the time. Next. This year we did 67 different seeding projects on 500 and almost 585 acres. And these can vary from doing enrichment seeding in areas we've already done that are now ready to take some more complicated seeding. It could be grant conversion, and you see the lower one in green says cropland conversion, and this is at Pleasant Valley. And the majority of that, and it was to expand the bison grazing area into what had been an adjoining cornfield. Again, not a very productive cornfield, but one that we can use to expand the bison grazing in the next couple of years. You'll also see highlighted other habitat national wildlife refuge. And you'll see that 165 acres were sown on 8 different projects. This is not on district land, and I want to call it out for an important reason. All of the parcels that we did the seeding with, because we have that knowledge and we have that very specialized equipment, were done on permanently preserved land that adjoins district sites. And in almost all those cases, it was properties the district has identified as something that we would like to see preserved. over the next 50 years. So for a small input on the front end, a week or two worth of work in the winter, because we do so in winter when there's snow on the ground, we're able to create habitat at a very low cost for the district. It's on adjoining land. So that's kind of leveraging our know-how and our skill into creating habitat that's going to positively affect district sites and open space in Henry County, but we don't own it.
Is the seed cost shared with the agency that does own the land?
They buy the seed.
They buy the seed.
We provide the specialized equipment and an operator.
That's good.
And on the other side, you'll also see a highlight of 1,380,668. I was going to get rid of 23, but 23 cents. But Lori works very hard on this. So I left it in. That is the value of seed that's been collected by our volunteers and staff since 2006. So our budget for seed is relatively small and hasn't gone up very often over the past 20 years. It's less. I think it's right now operating at somewhere around $60,000. And that raise just came when we had to do the Coon Creek projects. So it's been around 50,000 or 49,000 for 4 decades. But we're able to do the work we do because we're also able to harvest what's already been sown. And our staff tends to work with the harvesting equipment to get grasses and the larger seeds. But our volunteers go after the very expensive, hard to harvest things. And so you see that figure is pretty substantial. Next. Working landscapes are how we refer to the district's farmland. And I like to bring this up in each report because I think it's important to understand how we tier those working lands. We have tier 1, which is conventional farmland, and this will occur when the district winds up with a piece of new ground. If you were tract, for example, has conventional farmland, it's been farmed under conventional farming for years and years. Tier 2 is sustainable, and that's what happens when it enters our farm program. So it gets an NRCS conservation plan, and that may include field borders, and may include filter strips, and so it moves to a different stage. We have been moving the last few years into regenerative farming, which is adding more conservation practices. So that could be no-till on highly erodible ground, it could be cover crops in the winter, could be things like that. And we do convert some farmland to habitat, but we also convert farmland to long-term farming. And a good example of that would be the joint grassland venture, where we take land and convert it into hay ground, native hay ground in some cases, conventional hay in another, and then it continues to be farmed indefinitely, but under a farming plan that allows the grassland birds to pull off their nesting before the harvest of hay happens. So there is a considerable amount of district land, a couple thousand acres, that will probably be in permanent farming for decades, because we can work directly with the operators to have that kind of cohesive farming program that works for both. Yeah.
I'm asking a lot of questions.
That's okay.
Because I'm running short in my time here. And some of these initials you've explained before, but what is NRCS?
The Natural Resource Conservation Service, and
Is that
they're
a federal
right?
agency?
And they're the ones who typically for any agricultural interest that wants a conservation plan, they're typically the ones that will put it together. And when we began our program, we went to them to get those kinds of plans. Thanks. So this helps you understand the difference between those tiers. So this is just based on soil loss, and these are general figures that come out of NRCS. So even when you're doing great farming conventionally, you'll still lose some soil each year. And when you move to sustainable practices like border strips and grass waterways and filter strips, you'll lose less. In regenerative agriculture, you're working to actually build soil up and not lose any of it. Now, these are very general types of explanations. You can have a great conventional farmer that is losing far less tonnage per acre just because of the way they farm. You can have a really lousy regenerative farmer who's losing soil anyway. But these are our goals, to get to 0 or as close to it of soil loss and to actually build that soil up through our farm program. That does 2 things. It means the soil is more productive for our operators, but it also means that when we eventually do switch to a different kind of habitat, on a particular piece of ground at some point in the future, we have the best soil to go into possible. So some farm program highlights from this year. We now have the board approved what we call a voluntary conservation lease upgrade. This is not required of any of our operators, but we have had operators who have approached us and said, you know what? I like what regenerative ag is doing for my operation. I'm getting better yields. I'm willing to go the next step. And so we've designed a voluntary conservation lease upgrade where you can add more practices to the area you're renting from the district. And that's the first, and we began it in 2022. We also had our first green goat lease in 2022. It's on a very small piece of ground, about 5 acres, but goats like to eat buckthorn. So goats are really our friend. And we're doing an experiment to see if they can clean up an area of buckthorn and honeysuckle and other things that we would like to not see there. And hopefully we'll give you a report next year on how the green goats have done. I'm at Wildlife Resource.
I'm sorry.
We gotta go back. But I'd like to talk about our Wildlife Resource Center. Just look at the figures. We often think of Wildlife Resource Center working with rehabilitating wildlife, and they do that. They had 139 patients admitted this year. But they do many other things as well. They work very closely on our Blandings and Green Snake Head Start programs. So those are hatching out the eggs. In the case of Blandings, they'll hold them for a while. In the case of green snakes, they go straight from hatching a couple of days later, a week later, back out into the field. So they are really helping to augment populations of animals that are at very low levels and have been declining for years. We know it's successful because we've had Blandings that hatched out 20 years ago that are having their own young now. So we know that they survive. And the way we know that is because they get a universal product code inserted underneath their arm so you can scan them. And we have a scanner, but if you're not near a scanner, you can always take it into a jewel. Scanner and see what I want. But look at how many.
Go with you.
Yeah, you do what you gotta do, you know. They handled over 2,000 separate phone calls in the course of 2022. And these can be everything from someone who just doesn't know what to do because they have a raccoon in their garage, to somebody who finds a fawn by itself and wants to know what to do to save it. And it's our folks at Wildlife Resource Center that will say, pick a good chair and wait and watch the mother come back for it. So they are providing information out there 365 days a year. They don't close. They also do public programs in the schools with the animals. And so they did 85 public programs, 2,257 people in attendance, most of those kids, most of the time. So they do everything from what's tame, where they have a guinea pig and a wild animal, to more in-depth programs about wildlife. And they're really some of our frontline educators. Volunteer stewardship grew again this year. I think part of that has to do with folks who were exposed to district sites during COVID and realized what a great resource they had in their backyard and wanted to give back. So you can see those hours are going up, and that correlates. 2020 is the worst year we had for COVID, of course. But you can see those numbers going up ever since we've had a full-time natural resource volunteer stewardship ecologist. And it helps to have somebody whose job is to relate to volunteers and to help them get into the program and learn. And as far as learning goes, some of you have heard of TED Talks. We have Tom Talks. And Tom Talks are Tom Simpson, our research ecologist, who works with our volunteer stewardship ecologist, and they develop programs that can be posted online so people can access them whenever they want. And these are the 4 that were developed this year. Nice. I would like to mention conservation funding. This is just kind of a sampling of some of the assistance that the district has gotten. We break them in, our division, into restoration grants and land protection grants. And land protection grants are really designed to help preserve open space. And those come primarily from Illinois Clean Energy. And both us and one of our partners were recipients of those grants this year. We have restoration grants that come from a variety of places. You'll see a lot of them that say MCCF on there. And that's because our foundation funds an awful lot of good programs that we wouldn't be able to do otherwise. So the reintroduction of the checker spot butterfly, freshwater mussels, our big wood program, those are all MCCF supported. This has been a great year for the School Springs Wetland and Stream Bank. And you'll see at the bottom, it says total slells to date. Those are when sales are really hard to get done and they don't go easy. But we have sold out all of our available wetland credits at this point, and we only have 380 feet of stream credit available. Now, as we meet performance standards, we'll have credits available in both of those areas for sale probably next year. That's the hope. But we have done very well in terms of having available credits and being able to sell them. We were able to discount credits to the county, to the McHenry County Department of Transportation. That will help them lower costs on some of the bridge projects they're doing. That money flows into what's called the Natural Resource Special Revenue Fund. And that is a fund that was set up that allows us to fund in perpetuity the management costs of things like wetland mitigations, which we are bound to manage for in perpetuity. It allows us often to draw on that to complete a project in order to receive a grant reimbursement. Some grants work where you do the work and then you get reimbursed. Well, if you don't have the funds to do the work up front, you can't get the grant. So it's kind of like a cycling process where we have that available. And finally, those dollars pay for 2 full-time and part of another full-time position within natural resources. So those positions do not draw on general operations. So when we have our general operation levy, what it would normally cost for those positions do not come out of that. And that in turn allows those dollars to be diverted to other departments and other divisions that have needs as well and don't necessarily have wetland mitigation projects that are available. So it really helps the district's bottom line and allows us to move forward with the project. Okay. I'll close with these last 2 slides because I think they're important to put in perspective the kind of work that the district does, the kind of work that the board has allowed us to do over the years. And it really talks to the reason a conservation district exists in this county. There are about 8 million species that we know about on Earth, and this is everything, including insects. Each one of them unique, each one of them with their own unique genetic coding, most of which have never been studied. And the United Nations Intergovernmental Science Policy, blah, 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 estimates that 1 out of 8 of those species are close to extinction. Many of them right now, and many more within the next couple of decades. But on district sites, this trend is going in the opposite direction. We're using thoughtful land protection, diverse partnerships, and very purposeful land management to create habitat and manage it. And so we see things like trumpeter swans, and we see things like bobcats and eagle nests, and we see things like rare plant populations moving up. So that trend worldwide isn't going to be reversed by some worldwide decision. It's reversed at the local level. It's reversed by organizations like the Conservation District moving forward with management. Next. And our mission's never been more critical. He's since passed away, but Thomas Berry was an Episcopalian bishop that wrote a book at about 2000 called The Great Work. And what he talked about is what he felt the great work of humanity would be in the new century to come. Made this statement, he said, we live in a rare and a defining moment of grace in the first decades of the 21st century. Our decisions in those first few decades will determine the fate of humanity for the next 10,000. And I think he really had an insight there, and we can see it in things like climate change. We can see it in things like increases in forest fires and heavier storms. We have a lot of important decisions to make in the next few decades. And I think the Conservation District and our Natural Resource Program is really well poised to help with that. So that's 2022.
Well, that was a great presentation. Very, very interesting. Do any of the trustees or John, our liaison, do you have any questions for Ed?
You know, I do. the set asides, you know, the $776,000 and cents, what was it, the wetland mitigation, how does that work then? How do we do that?
So the board sets a
That came up today in the McHenry County Board meeting.
Right, the board sets a price, the way credits are allocated, if you're gonna impact a stream. And there's no way to avoid it, the Army Corps of Engineers says, all right, you can impact the stream for your project, but. You have to mitigate that by restoring a stream somewhere else, or if you're gonna impact a wetland and it's unavoidable, we'll let you do that. But you have to make wetland somewhere else to make up for it. So the first thing is the permitting process. And the Army Corps or the county, if it's a local wetland or a local stream, will make a decision and set a ratio. So you're gonna destroy an acre of wetland, but we want you to rebuild 2 to make up for it. Then the person who gets the permit or the entity that has the permit has the option of fulfilling it in different ways. And one of those ways is to go to a wetland bank where the wetlands have already been recreated and the stream has been restored and say, I need to buy 2 acres worth of wetland credit. So our bank will probably at its conclusion have about 25 acres worth of recreated wetlands. We can then say, okay, we will sell you 2 acres of credit. The board has set the price at this price. Would you like to buy it? And so that fulfills their obligation to the Army Corps or to the local entity. Same thing with street credits. And that's how the funding comes in and how the pricing is set. Yeah, it's been in operation, the concept, since the very late 1990s. And the district for many years just did individual mitigation projects. So the developer would come and say, I need to mitigate this much wetland. And the district could do a project just for that. What the bank allows us to do is consolidate that into one site. And that's really important because when you do a wetland mitigation, you have to come up to some very stiff standards. The Army Corps has a report each year that they make us do. I think we run 25 different transect lines in School Springs and send the results to the Corps. And you have to keep making those standards, and the bank is not signed off and finished until you've achieved those standards. So it's a really complex process, and it requires a lot of work to make it work well.
Is it the Army Corps that certifies that then, that whole process?
Yeah, we had to go through the Army Corps to set up the bank. They had to look at the site, they had to approve the prospectus, which says, here's what we're gonna do and here's what we hope to complete. And then every sale has to be sent to them as a ledger, part of our ledger. And we have to do a report each year. And the Corps will come out from time to time to look at sites.
Oh, sure.
I hear it's very costly to set those permits up.
Yeah,
It's a lot of work.
it is. It is.
There was a Supreme Court decision here a couple of weeks ago about the EPA and wetland, saying that they overstepped their bounds in terms of what a waterway is and all that. You see that impacting us?
Yeah, I'll give you kind of a brief synopsis. Gabe has followed it pretty close too. It should not affect McHenry County because there are 2 types of jurisdictional wetlands in McHenry County. Those that fall under the Army Corps, federal, and those that are called isolated waters of McHenry County, which means they don't fall under Corps jurisdiction, so they fall under the stormwater ordinance, which means our wetlands and streams are protected no matter what. If the Corps loses jurisdiction over a particular type of area, it's picked up by the McHenry County. So it won't affect us directly. It will have some impacts in other parts of the country as well. This process has been going on for a while. The jurisdiction was under a very old law. We called it 1899 Refuse Act. And it's been chipped away at over the years. And I think what will eventually happen is down the line, there'll be a new federal law that just deals with wetlands across the country. But that's probably a decade away. Did you want to add anything?
It's good summary.
I'm gonna finish with questions or comments about sculpins and zebra and mussels. So sculpins are, if anyone is a fisherman, particularly smallmouth bass, sculpins are highly prized. So I wonder if there's a bass fishing organization that, just like Ducks Unlimited, supports our conservation, because if we support wildlife habitat, there'll be no more ducks for the hunters. I wonder if there's a bass fishing is such a big business. If there's a organization that you could tap, letting them know that you're restoring habitat for this cold water invertebrate that is a favorite for smallmouth bass. I mean, you might tap into something that there, could be monies available because you're doing work that supports the sport fishing industry.
We will check in to see if there's a Sculpins Unlimited.
Right.
Thanks, Ben Stanley.
I'm sure there's a bass on them. Now, the issue of zebra mussels, I know they're in the chain, and in my lifetime, I've seen the water quality in the chain improve, the clarity. I've also cut my feet on zebra mussels. Do you see the zebra mussels migrating into the nipper sink? And do they compete with this native mussel?
They are in the nippersink already.
Yeah.
The good news is that they don't swim well upstream, the Lacoria, so it's a slow advance. Where they are really thick, they're not that way in the nippersink, but in places like Lake Erie, the problem is they will cover
Right.
freshwater mussels and essentially starve them by filtering everything out. I think what we're starting to say, well, they're also eaten by gizzard shad, which is a fish that's in the nippersink. So what you saw with many years ago, there was an Asian mussel that invaded, and then the same problem was going on, and eventually
There's a predator.
there was a predator that took it down in numbers. So that's what we're hoping is long-term, that's what will occur.
My final question is that bear that was sighted in Lake County, is it headed towards Vacation Park here?
We do have a large mammal reporting process, so we're following it closely.
Ed, thank you for your expertise in that. Dave, we're looking forward to your remarks. You and
All right, so Cindy and I are going to present the LPNR dashboards, and that's just essentially a data visualization of what our operations of the division do. And I'll do the first few slides, and then Cindy will end up doing a demo. But Cindy is our GIS analyst, and everything that you see here is from her efforts, not mine. I'm just providing the context of what we're talking about here tonight. First slide. So what we're going to try and discuss tonight is start off with the why, the how, and what. And the why being the history of how we have reported our dashboards, and the how being how our division summaries are reported to the board. You saw Ed's report, and that's kind of the high level of the division. There's also other reports out there that you have seen. And then the what is what we're planning to do with the dashboards. Major objective here is going to be definitions, and we want to make sure that everyone understands those definitions before we get into the demo, because it'll be important to understand the information that's provided through the demo. And then the demonstration is going to be how data flows through our division, and then also a demonstration of the dashboard tool that we'll be providing here tonight. 42,080, those are pieces of data, but they don't really mean much to you if I just say those numbers. If I say 40 hours, 2,000 acres, 80 fish, something like that, it provides some context. When you have additional context on top of data, that provides information. So what we're trying to provide the board is information versus just data. What we did previously is provide hours of an activity. So the district has inputs, human resources, financial resources, capital resources, and those resources provide activities, they're applied to the land, and then we have outputs. And after you have outputs, you actually have outcome. And Ed talked a lot about outcome in the divisional report. And that's really what the board would want to see is output and outcome as you're directing the organization. So we thought that it would be best to move from an activity type dashboard to an output and outcome type dashboard. And that will be what we demonstrate tonight. The how is how we currently summarize our work. Whenever we have a project or a specific program, we always provide an annual report or a program report or a project report to the board, so you understand the outputs and the outcomes from the projects or programs. Here's just an example of some of the summaries of work that we do in LPNR. Burn report, hunting report, the heritage report they just heard. And then Cindy also provides end of year, being end of fiscal year budgets to our accounting division for some of their reportings. Next one. So what we're trying to do as we move forward in data visualization and providing the board high quality information so you can do your jobs better is continue to provide all those annual reports because they're important for specific programs and identifying the activities, outputs, and outcomes of the program, but also to provide a real-time data visualization for the different activities of the division. And that's where the dashboards are going to come in. So everyone will be able to have access in real time to this dashboard tool. And you can see how the division is progressing in our different operational output sections, if you will, over time. And at the end of the year, Cindy will go through and evaluate all of the different components of data and essentially make sure that there aren't any issues. She can explain it better, but reconcile all the data here to make sure that we have the final figure. And then once you have that final annual figure, we can compare that over time, and that'll allow the board to see progression and make higher level decisions. All right, so here's the definitions. It's really important. And we're not going to move forward until we understand this. Every time you hear effort, so if there's a total effort on there, we're talking about overlapping areas. So if I have an acre of land right here, and I go out and I herbicide, apply herbicide to that acre of land 4 times, I have 4 acres of effort. Okay, so we're stacking our treatments. We often get asked, how much does it cost, or how much inputs do you need to restore an acre of land? We always say, well, it depends on how that acre of land starts. So when you have a lot of inputs, different acres are going to have different amount of inputs that are needed. And when you have stacked, there'll be 4 acres of effort applied to that 1 acre of land. Not every acre needs the same amount of effort. I believe that that is outlined in detail in our heritage report. So that's effort. Is there any question on effort? Does that make sense?
I got a question.
Well, okay.
So this is something new.
Yes, it'll be something new. And I have a graphic that'll show this next, but does that make sense that we're stacking? Okay. The next one is treatment area. So if I have the acre of land, that's the actual treatment area. It doesn't matter how much stacking, how much effort there is on top of it. That's the actual acre of land that's on the landscape. So that's when we start to take a look at outcome. So we take a lot of effort to get a specific outcome, but the different efforts are going to be evaluated differently based on each acre of land. But the treatment area is specific to 1 acre of land, no overlap, so no stacking. Make sense? Then cumulative is just additional. So we're taking a look at figures over the course of time. And this will be more observable in the next 3 slides.
And just to kind of emphasize, so although we are having definitions, the actual work on the landscape is the same. It's just what we're doing is trying to better communicate and to measure performance and how we're performing and resource wise with these ways to demonstrate, but the work has been consistent.
So if we were just providing activities, there's no way for the board to understand efficiency and effectiveness. So what we're trying to do is provide you information that is going to help identify efficiency and effectiveness over time. Yes, sir.
Me being the farmer.
Yeah.
Okay. The average person here, you understand all this?
Do the next slide. Will help.
No, I'm just saying,
Well, it's a different way of thinking.
Well, yeah.
And so you have to.
different way of,
So if you go over your field 5 times in the course of a season, from tillage and putting in the crop and then
right,
amending it and,
it's just different.
it's a different way. I mean, if were all soybeans or corn, you'd sort of probably be able to look at this and it would
I
immediately
understand
gel.
I'm just saying.
Yeah.
A very applicable analysis to understand natural resource management. A high quality remnant is going to take a lot less effort to manage because of the resilience that community has. Versus if we're starting with that agricultural field and we want to restore it to some measure of quality, that's gonna take a lot more effort. So that's really what we're doing here is showing the board that there's different efforts for different acres of land. So each acre of land and we have different. The next slide will help. Okay, so here's Goose Lake chemical treatments. And this is over the course of whatever time, 1 year. And there's 14 different treatments. And the effort is 134 acres of effort. So considering that stacking, because those lines overlap, there's 134 acres of effort. The next one is the actual area. So you're removing that overlap. 98 acres received treatment. So even though our effort, our rate, our inputs were 134 acres with, it's on 98 acres of land. And then the next one is the cumulative. So this is land that has received treatment over time. So over the course of time, we are currently providing chemical treatments to 422 acres. Does that make sense? The different efforts, treatments, and cumulative. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Cindy for the last few slides here, and then she's going to do the demonstration.
Okay, hopefully this doesn't confuse things more, but since I'm the GIS analyst, I like to throw out flow diagrams. This just provides me and you with an idea of how information flows through our system and excuse me, and our division. So we are starting with our strategic plan and mission within our division. And you know, we have all of these business functions of our division, and through each of those areas, they all produce information. All of that information comes in and it has to go into a system so that we can produce outputs and summaries so that we can communicate with folks like you or the public or other people within our district about the work that we're doing. So there's an end of year process that happens much like accounting has to go through an end of year process. I actually go through an end of year process with all of our natural resource information. And once I do that, I'm able to push that information further into the system to automatically produce our summaries, and that turns into all those reports that Gabe talked about. This is a simplified view of that. Strategic plan, we're going through our division, goes into an information system, it's processed, and then we can produce output. So what I did was produced a dashboard based on the metrics that we thought would be most important for you all to understand the work that we're doing. So this diagram just kind of identifies what that system looks like. So to produce this dashboard, I had to create a system actually of all these little pieces of information. And they work together, and that's what I'll be done right now. Last slide. Sure. I think we're done. Sure. Okay, so this is actually called a web application. It's developed directly from our GIS, and basically I designed a bunch of dashboards and put them together into a single application for anybody on the executive leadership team or board members, if you're interested, to have access to kind of view the information periodically throughout the year, or if you wanted to look at summaries. I'll kind of go through each dashboard and give you an idea of what those summaries look like. And start with land protection. So each dashboard will have different elements or diagrams, summaries, ways to look at information. And then each dashboard will also have an interactive map. I won't go too much into this one. I'll show you a little bit more on the map side of things when we get to prescribed fire. For land protection right now, this just kind of shows a summary of all the acres by district sites. This diagram on the bottom shows land protection acres acquired over time. And then over in the upper right corner, we have district acres by the type of land. So we have lands that we acquired for be simple. We have some conservation easements, we have a lease agreement, any lands that we have management agreements on, subtract so that. So our prescribed fire dashboard. And this shows up here in the upper left-hand corner. This is total effort acres. So this is just basically a summary of all the effort acres. So since we've been recording prescribed fire acres, and I have data that goes back pretty good. Our prescribed fire data is pretty good. It goes all the way back to the 80s. So we've already burned over 50,000 acres. And then this total cumulative number, this is where we talk about how many acres have actually been burned. So on our sites that we are managing, over 12,000 acres have had some kind of prescribed fire treatment. And then up in the upper right-hand corner, we can see what our current fiscal year numbers are. So this fiscal year just started as of April, so kind of the later part of the spring burn season. And then just under 1,000 acres have been burned. So these numbers might be a little different on acres identified in other reports if we are reporting by calendar year. This dashboard is designed for fiscal year. So your interactive map is something you can access. Also, you can zoom into a site. We can look at our legend. I can turn layers up and on. Right now, we're looking at areas that have currently been burned. So these are some of the areas that were burned this spring. If I would like to look at other layers, so I'm going to turn on the burn frequency layer. It's just minutes.
Bill, this kind of gets to the question that you asked about fire return interval. You can see that in this.
Well, this is an example of the frequency of burns in Glacial Park, with the darker colors being the most burn. That's 10 or more burns have occurred in those areas. And then it's orange. Orange is 4 to 10 acres, yellow is 1 to 3. So this process is updated. So I run something in GIS that actually does this for me every year, so that those areas we can see how that changes over time.
That'd be fireball.
It's a lot of info.
Yeah. So I'll run into each of the individual land management activities that we do. Chemical treatments is its own dashboard. Again, for mechanical and chemical treatments, I'm kind of showing you historical data back to about 2011. We do have data that goes back a little bit further, but there's still a little bit of cleanup that needs to be done. So I figured let's look at the last 10 years of data, and this just kind of shows you total effort over the last 10 years. Sorry. And then this is your summary of all of those efforts. So in the last 10 years, we've mechanically treated about 8,000 acres.
When you say mechanical,
mowing
Thank you.
or cutting.
Cutting trees
Yeah.
down.
With cedar.
Sure.
And again, your interactive map. You can turn those layers off and on. Here's some of our current treatments that we've done up in the upper right-hand corner again. We can see current fiscal year numbers, so we've already treated just under 100 acres. And then another little graph that just kind of shows how much we're doing by month.
And so with each of these, you created a back end with all the data, and then when we share this, we're not gonna have a ninja, we can go in and click on things and you won't destroy the data.
Not at all.
There, but you'll be able to certain things and
A visual view.
Sure.
Access. And it doesn't even, right, the details aren't visible. Chemical treatments, again, this is sort of the same sort of thing. Last 10 years, we're looking at over 30,000 acres of effort have been treated. Current fiscal year, we're looking at over 500 acres already, and planting records. So this one I designed a little differently with Lori. We wanted to kind of look at her records also go back, let's say 74. So we've got really great historical data for all of our planting and seeding efforts. So we can kind of see what that looks like over time. I can see that, you know, all of this data together summarizes over 10,000 acres have been treated. That's your total effort. On the right-hand side, again, we're looking at current fiscal year numbers. So we've already treated or planted and seeded 141 acres. And this is kind of broken up by the type of planting effort. So we've had some cover crop areas, we've had some marsh plantings, dry prairie, savanna. And then current fiscal year, this just kind of provides like the percentage rates. So that kind of shows you land management, each area of expertise. And then this dashboard here is the land management summary dashboard. And so this is this total of the treatment. So for each treatment I've identified here, your fiscal year 2023, which was this last fiscal year, this is your total prescribed fire treatments for the last fiscal year. 1,300 acres were burned, 355 acres were planted, 232 brush removal treatments, and 1,800 acres were chemically treated. Once I have all of those acres, I actually consolidate those, and then I get this total treatment area. So I might have done one of each of these on one area of land, which is your effort. Once I consolidate all of those together, I get this center diagram here, which shows how many acres have I treated this season. So for 2023, there was just over 2,000 acres treated. Might have been multiple times with different treatments, but just over 2,000 acres. And then this lower diagram here is just another way of looking at all of these activities, again, over time. So one of the other things that I often got asked was this cumulative acres. So cumulative acres, right, is different than this total acres. Cumulative kind of shows all of the history plus that current year. So at the end of fiscal year 2023, how many acres of land have we ever treated? Was 15,000, just over 15,000. And we can see over time, I was able to go back and run those numbers on the historical data. And we can see over time how those numbers have increased and probably will continue to increase or stay the same. They're never going to go any lower. So we're going to.
If we have 25,000 acres, 15,000 of those acres have been treated at some point in time.
Correct.
Thank you.
Absolutely, yeah, and then every year, if we start new restoration areas, those acres, those are those increases in acres over time. It's just kind of summarizes cumulative by the type of activity, which we already talked about. Prescribed fire, we've done 12,000, we've had 8,000 chemical burns and 6,000 acres treated with planting and seeding efforts and almost 6,000 acres in mechanical treatments. It's a lot of information.
It's a lot.
And cumulative acres, though, is that recurring over one particular acre would get counted in that? So it wasn't actually 12,000, it could have been 4,000 with multiple treatments.
Correct. So
Yeah.
the cumulative is everything historical added to the
That
current year.
reserves.
Absolutely, yeah. And it, believe me, I wrote those we wrote those descriptions and then I rewrote them. And I often, just going through this process, because I'm asked a lot of questions. There are staff who are asking me for one thing, managers who ask me for another, and then the executive leadership team might ask for another. So this was my way of trying to figure out, I would like to do one process. I was doing a little bit of this process multiple times a year to get everybody different numbers. So I was able to develop a system to pretty much, I've got one process and I'll give everybody what they need,
As long as you can keep it up to date.
as long as I can keep it up to date.
And as long as everyone understands the definitions, because it all
Yeah.
comes down to the definition.
Correct.
Yeah, and so you have to
Full staff.
start like we're in kindergarten and then repeat it about 10 times and then you'll probably have to repeat it again. I
I
have,
won't be testing you.
well,
Good thing.
obviously, this is very powerful. And when, you think of an agency and you have staff moving on and it's someone's recollection about, well, yeah, 10, 15 years ago, we did this or we did that, and it's
Right.
in a paper file and, no one can find the file. I mean, here it's all, now we have to understand, you have to be better at a keyboard than I am, and you have to understand the definitions, but this is
Right.
a wonderful accomplishment and it will
Yes, a lot of work.
reverberate. People will benefit from it long after all of us, including you, are gone. So I don't mean to stop you at this point, but if you would like to finish and then we'll have questions.
No, I only had, this was just the farm dashboard and there was a hunting dashboard, but I think you pretty much get.
I think we get the idea. Lloyd?
This is a great tool. Have you copywritten it, or is there any way we can propagate it, you show it at some national convention or something, just seems to be phenomenal.
Thank you.
You guys, you ought to consider that, either way, how others, agencies could use this template.
So you started this from scratch?
Well, I had little pieces to
So
start.
no, but what I mean is, it's not like a software program that you.
Oh, no.
That's what I mean.
Well,
Esri is.
yeah,
I keep referring back to like farm, like for us, we use this called field view.
feel you. Mhm.
And then you enter, like I have maps, everything I get on my phone, same thing. But
It's the same thing. So when you go out into a field and you treat your field, you are able to look at that data
Right.
in a graphical
Date
format.
and, we don't have to do it
No.
manually. Like you gotta rely on the guy that's, trimming the trees or
Yeah.
answering report to tell you that this is what's happening.
How is that information fed to you?
So that is a great question. And honestly, I don't enter the data. So our staff does
Oh.
a fantastic job entering the data in the field. So,
Okay, I was wondering how that happened.
yeah, no.
Let me see, I did good.
I'm good, but I'm not that good. It would take a lot of effort. So we utilize, Esri, is a geographical information systems manufacturer. So we utilize something called ArcGIS, and use an app similar to your field view, it's called Field Maps. And when staff are in the field and they're doing treatments, they're recording their data as they're working.
Oh, so it's, they got like a,
They can use the app on their phone, they can use it on their desktop. What I do is process it after the year's over, make sure all the information is filled in correctly so that it can be summarized. And then I just developed this front end that looks at basically the data that our staff are entering.
Is any of this data updated on a monthly basis or all once a year?
It's entered all throughout the field season.
Right.
So when they add a mechanical treatment, that's automatically in
It's
this.
real time.
It's real-time data.
That's a.
Yeah, it's just the annual summary. So when you look at the bar for 2023, you can see the bar for 2024 fiscal year. So current numbers are available.
That last page you were on. Is there a view of like,
This one.
no, the one right before that, where we show like the total acreage per site?
Oh, the planting records?
No,
Oh, I have-
it was the last one.
The farm field, I have
There you go, yeah, is there anything that shows like the site farm field acres and then like some type of percentage of the applications that have been applied at those sites, or?
We would love to have that information. We are working with our farmers.
That would be the real line.
Correct, yeah, so and our agroecologist has been working on getting some of those numbers. So she is actually in the process of compiling the information that she gets from our farmers. And we are trying to figure out what is the best format to store and house that information. So that you could see some of that information.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, this has been very, very interesting, and certainly don't mean to cut you off. Perhaps you're getting tired. I think you've done a great job.
Thank you.
And if anyone wants to see this in the context of the hunting program and anything else, they know where to find that information.
Yep.
And if someone really, as a trustee, wants to get into this, we could stop by your office and you would show us how to do it.
How do you get into the case?
So what we plan to do, we want to go through this presentation first, and then when we do our quarterly dashboard, what we're gonna do is we'll give each trustee, one link that you'll be able to share, but you'll be able to go in there and then you can click on and look at the different things and just, and then we can help. Now you got some baseline. We'll probably, do some screenshots and things that we keep, but this is an ongoing repository of our information. So that way you can look at any time you have a question. Of course, we can answer any questions you have, but those of you that love technology or want to just kind of get in there and take a look, I think it's a lot that can be helpful, and definitely will answer a lot of questions that we get. And I appreciate the streamline and work with Cindy and the natural resources team. Long-term for an organization, big picture is that all of our areas, the district would begin to manage and map. And so we can look at efficiencies and effectiveness. But this is really, it helps tell a story. And, we're starting here and we've done a great job.
Very slick tool.
Thank you.
Well, thank you and Gabe and Ed. I think you've done a great job of keeping us enlightened. So now we'll turn our attention to new business. And the first item is 6.1, review of the agenda for next week. I reviewed the agenda as Elizabeth and Christie posted it. I'm comfortable with it. If anyone, is it possible to put the agenda up?
I can find that. Yeah.
Then if anyone, wants to say, let's talk about this, or let's talk about that, or I wish to pull this or that. Otherwise, I'm comfortable with it. I'm sure we've all done our homework because we're all. Thank you. So. We have minutes to approve. There's a treasurer's report. Now, I haven't seen the treasurer's report yet, but that'll be posted soon, I guess.
Oh, it's in the packet.
Is it in the packet?
Yeah.
Okay, I have to do my home. And then we, so I don't need to favor this, but people can look at these items and now's the time to so that when it comes time to do the consent agenda, we're all ready to rock and roll. I think we're going to have some presentation about the Goose Lake water management. That's on.
Right, it's on the consent agenda, but I pulled it out specifically this evening just so we could talk a little bit about it.
That'll be that on next item 6.2. Okay, well then I think we've reviewed the agenda for next week and it seems to pass muster. Thank you. So now, Ed, I think you're up again. Just
I'll do a brief introduction and just turn it over to Gabe, but as you know, we've had ongoing discussions with the Hebron Drainage District on how best to accumulate data on the wetlands and the water situation at Goose Lake so that the work we're doing doesn't impact any of the adjoining farmland. And one of the most important things to have is reliable, consistent data that we can all see, the drainage district and the district. And so one of the things we were charged with in March as a staff was to go back and to put some staff gauges in immediately, which are visual monitors, but also to figure out what would be a long-term solution. And Gabe and other staff members worked really hard on this, finding something that we think will work, and I'm going to throw over to you.
Yeah, I don't have a presentation, but in the board summary is our 3 votes for a real-time data monitoring system. So that includes installation of the equipment, housing of the cloud, so you can have data in the cloud, and then also a website to view the data. So both the Conservation District Board and Conservation District, as well as the Drainage District Board and any interested parties can view the data in real time. And the real-time data is going to be the inflow side of the water control structure, which is the upstream side, the outflow side of the water control structure, which is the downstream side, and then the drainage to the south of 173. And then as well as one point in the lake, which will be the real-time elevation of surface water. So we're going to be evaluating groundwater in the actual water control structures. So the tile water control structure is on a tile system, and we're managing the water, holding back water in this lake for habitat purposes. So we'll be able to monitor inflow, outflow, and then correlate to surface water in Goose Lake all in real time. And the goal is to have this data over the course of 2 to 3 years. Hopefully we have a normal year, a wet year and a dry year during those 3 years, and we can take a look at specific rain events and evaluate how water moves through that structure and then how it impacts the surface water in Goose Lake. From a habitat standpoint, though, we're taking a look at not only the specific elevations of water, but how that water impacts the habitat. So that's where Ed had mentioned we have staff gauges, but we also have cameras monitoring the habitat. So you'll be able to see the different habitat structure based on water elevation in Goose Lake. But the importance of having this done at Goose Lake at the water control structure is to provide specific data so we can have objective conversations between the 2 agencies.
I think it's a very solid solution and will provide very useful information. Does anyone else wish to comment or have a question? Or
I should add, and it's in the board summary, but we have been doing bi-weekly monitoring of the water control structure as it is right now. This obviously be real-time continuous, so 10 measurements a day. But since we started monitoring, we've left the boards right after the meeting that we were at, because they said it was at the right level. And it was 15 inches below grade. Those boards have not been moved. And since that time, water fluctuations in Moose Lake have been between 2.2 feet below grade and 2.9 feet below grade. And then on the downstream side, it's been around 4.5 feet to around 8 feet variation, illustrating that the downstream drainage structure is functioning properly.
Now, you're gonna have access to this, and is the Hebron Drainage District gonna have the facility to look at this data?
It'll be
Or
to,
they have to work through you?
we
or
give them the website, so anyone can
It'll
view
be
it.
on a website
Yeah.
and anybody can access the
Yeah,
website.
we discussed internally different options and decided not to house it on the district, on an external website that whoever's interested could view.
No one has access to this property other than the district.
No, just the data.
Thank you, and I think it's a very timely work.
And actually, all the bids were fairly close, so, you know, really went, yeah, so, good job.
It's on the, it's spider.
I think Elizabeth's voice is failing and I know she's laboring her respiratory issues, so we'll just move along. Thank you.
But we wanted to bring that this is an unanticipated expenditure. It was not budgeted for, so we are taking out of unanticipated funds and wanted to present that to the board. Obviously, a discussion. It is within our purchasing threshold, but because of that, make sure everybody was aware of this.
I think at some point, not tonight, but be interesting to hear, what is the relationship between the water district board and conservation district? I understand, you know, I know there's been a long.
We're still trying to figure that out, actually. We are.
Still trying to get a memorandum of understanding.
Yeah.
That they will agree to. I guess there are specific laws, Illinois state
Statutes, yeah.
statutes that regulate drainage districts going back into the 1800s, perhaps, or early 1900s. And obviously, we have a charter and we're under another body of law. And like anything legal, it gets, it can be anxious.
I mean, does it boil down to the water district wants tiles that we don't? Is it that simple?
Yeah.
So the most important thing to understand is we've removed no tiles. What we've done is worked with the existing tiles and put an inline structure in, so it hooks up to the tile system at both ends. So we haven't made any permanent changes to the tile system. The concern, and I think it's valid on the part of the drainage district, is they're concerned about there being too much groundwater downstream where there's farming going on. And we've worked since 2005 to try to come up with a memorandum of understanding for managing the water control structures. And I think with this information, we're going to be able to do that with definite data that everybody can work from. You know, impression can sometimes be true. And so there are folks who have seen high water at Goose Lake over the years, and their impression is when the water level is a certain height, then this happens to the downstream side. This will give us actual data that we can go with. And it will be valuable for the drainage district to have that too, for planning their upkeep of drainage structures downstream from this. We're hoping that not only does it solve that problem, but it might be able to be useful as a model for working with other drainage districts across the state, because we're not the only conservation organization that will work with drainage districts. So it's all key toward getting a common memorandum of understanding that's acceptable to both parties. Thank you.
Well, that's great. Thanks. I think it's a step forward. Let's please go ahead with the work plan.
Oh, well, I had in your packet, you have these documents. I also sent out under separate so you could review, and then at your desk, I also printed out the large sheet. And that just shows of the 3 focus areas. I want to briefly go through those. The board had approved the strategic direction and our intentions and strategies. And then it was up to staff to identify those work plan items, those tactics, so to speak, that work us towards the specific strategies that were identified. And so that is what we have in front of you. We've focused the 3 focus areas. We have healthy landscapes, people, and wildlife. We've identified what our vision is for that particular focus area. We've identified our intentions, and then under healthy landscapes, people, and wildlife, we have 7 specific strategies that we want to work towards in the next 5 years. Same thing goes for visitor experience. We identified what the vision was for our visitor experience, our intentions. And then we have 6 strategies that we identified under visitor experience. And then lastly, under strategic focus number 3, organizational excellence, we have our vision, followed by our intentions, what we will do. And then we have 10 specific strategies to accomplish over the next 5 years. Now, under the work plan, what we did, and this plan is a little bit different, but we have aligned them. So under each of the individuals, I'm going to go back to healthy landscapes and people, which is on the first one, and there's 3 separate sheets for each of them. We presented it in 2 different formats. So if you prefer just a narrative that doesn't have who it's assigned to or what, you can basically get the same information there. But as far as the Excel sheets, that kind of helps us map out specifically what the area of action is, the year that we envision it being kicked off on. Some things take multiple years to work through, and some we're automatically saying it's not going to happen in the next 3 years. It's kicked off into 27, 28. And every year when we look at the work plan, we'll make some assessments. There may be things that we're working on that we find it's a dead end. It's not really producing the fruit or the direction that we want it to be. We will then sunset it. We may recommend something else to come on the list. We've had discussions. This has been prepared by our leadership team. The executive leadership team has reviewed it. We've socialized it back then with our leadership team and asked them to go back out to their individual working teams to provide feedback. So there's been a lot of back and forth. We've also looked at areas on some, as far as parity, some things are very specific, some things are larger. Not every actionable item that has a strategy necessarily has a direct work tactic item underneath it. But in essence, in many of the cases for this plan, we find that many things cross over into multiple areas. So many tactics, many solutions address several boxes, so to speak. And there's many examples that you can see that as we go through the plan. So I'm not going to go through each of these because they're lengthy. You've had time to review. I guess I would look to the board to see, is there anything on here that you have concerns about, you have questions about for clarification, or maybe there's something that we didn't identify as something that you feel is really critical, and how is that, should it be captured somewhere on the plan? There are a lot of items on here. And so when that becomes, that also creates a level of, for staff capacity wise, are we going to be able to obtain? And in many of these, there's a lot of flexibility for interpretation of how it works through, because there's many ways. But what it does do is the organization, because of the board's strategic focus and direction, when something else comes out of the blue and comes along and it's not on the plan, then we identify, is it in alignment or not? And if it's not, it gives the board and staff direction to say, not now. This is our plan and this is what we're working on. And I would say with this, it is a very ambitious plan, but I do believe with ambition, much can be achieved, as you've seen, but yet we have to be realistic in what can get done. And no one has ever been held on our team for failure to execute, because things do happen. But this allows us to focus on this as we go. So I'll stop talking and I guess ask and solicit feedback.
So I went through this on the, the packet and it's an awful aggressive plan. And I just, was a practical, all the stuff on here. That was just, as far as financing all this. That was just nice.
I would agree. There's a lot of 2024
Wow.
I wanted to accomplish more than it's just, it's aggressive, which is a great approach, but there's also something said for, I want to check off wins in the column more than pushback, so we need to do one more. So, I wasn't able to digest it enough to say which ones I would think yet that maybe could go to a 25 or 26, but
Well, obviously, the budget becomes sort of the way this is translated year by year. So I'll be gone. I won't be in the room, but the staff will put together a budget and Andy will polish it up and present it, and you all will pick it apart and make decisions, based on revenue and expenses and reserves and funding from other sources. So, I mean, I give the staff credit for having a wish list and maybe being, like the kid in the candy store, I want everything. And then at some point, reality sets in and then, decisions are made. But I think it's almost better to have a starting point of, well, this is a good idea. And when we have the resources, we'd like to go with it, whether it's, tomorrow or a year from tomorrow, or, that sort of depends upon budgetary issues. So we don't have to resolve that this evening. But I think, when you get something that has lots of items and you realize there's a lot of material there. Now, I picked out the northern, reestablished the northern view shed and enhanced the Wildlife Resource Center. I believe it was a facelift. And I just wasn't sure exactly what that might entail. And then I didn't understand what a blue zone was. That was one of the things here. So, I mean, in 30 seconds, someone can give me partial answers to those.
She did provide some answers on.
I don't know.
Yes, on the, I did identify, and I appreciate the questions, and yes, everything that's in the budget, to start there. These are reviewed on an annual basis as we do our budget plan. So if they're not funded, then it's not happening, and then it gets kicked out a year. And then a lot of this is exploration of looking at certain things and building up for a future. So it's a process. As far as the view shed in Glacial Park, so you received a plan, a presentation a couple months ago, and the feedback of the study that was done on the one building and the football building that's coming down. There's also been out there this structure where we do have bats, they call it bat barn, right? That's in and blocking, and as we're taking down buildings, long-term vision is, what are we going to do? We'd love a clean view shed. There's been discussion about the back road and how, it's not accessible and morbidity rates and things like that. So this is to study what would be the best way to transfer and to do something there. So it's not actual action, but it's really to put the plan in order. There are some things that need some immediate assistance. So that's what that one is about, and to really take a look at that. So we didn't call it bat barn, but we're talking about habitat so that we can make appropriate planning purposes for that. Specific to the aviary at the Wildlife Research Center, that is something that's believed that is long overdue, needs to be done. You heard the great work of our outreach and our programs. And so that's something to help that program is an area that needs an investment to be done. But I believe, if I'm not mistaken, Sarah, you're on board here. Are you? I believe you're still on.
Yes, I'm here.
Speak to the importance of the aviary for the Wildlife Resource Center.
Well, it houses our education birds as well as it's a location for our rehabilitating wildlife. It's over 25 years old. It's made of wood that through the years has been rotting. We've done some repairs on it, but and new innovative designs have come out since this thing was built. So we're looking to either replace it completely or at least do some major renovation on it. So it's safer and more usable for us. It protects our wildlife from outside sources. We don't want predators getting in there, and it houses them securely, so we will be able to use them in our educational programs.
This is also off Keystone Road.
No, this is off of Giant Oaks Road at the Wildlife Resource Center. So it's not open to the public, a public facility, but it's where we.
Thank you, and I would think that as you put together options, that would certainly be something that might gender support from the public. I mean, it's an attractive project, so our friends with the foundation might be able to help sell that idea and help to get some independent funding. Would be my thought.
And then the last item was the blue zone. And so Chief King has spoken very much, has been very advocating the concept. And then we've done a little bit more research on this. We do have in the county with the health department and their work, they've been doing a lot. There's a MAP Active Communities group. And so this is an exploration of would we partner, you know, is there an interest to seek that designation for McHenry County? I mean, kind of how we started that for McHenry County, what is, it kind of aligns with that and see if there's an interest, whether it is the blue zone designation or there's another designation out there. I think that's for us all to find out, but it's really working towards that common piece is to say McHenry County, we have a very active, healthy, natural lifestyle that's here. It's a great place to live and work. And could we be recognized by then helping with some of those health metrics that we talk about, like the pandemic and being out walking reduces obesity, diabetes, cardiovascular disease, et cetera. So this is just a way that we want to lean in and convene a group to see if they're interested in doing this. And if there is an interest, then we would help be part of a work plan. And it's not a day to start the conversation and then figure out what that looks like.
You know, I don't have any, I always have a comment. You know, well, the question is what might be the cost? And is this just a recognition of activities that we're already doing? Does it involve, you know, commitment of staff time and other resources? And are we partnering with people that, you know, we're interested in partnering with? Or are they basically, you know, have their hands out and want us to either pay for it or do the work? So that would all be questions that I would ask those of you who are going to confront this decision to try to get answers to. It may be wonderful. I don't know where the word blue comes from. Blue sky, blue in reference to law enforcement, blue, and I've got the blues. So you know, sometimes there are
We had to come up with some name.
there are words that are in the lexicon that have a lot of implications that, you know, just go over my head, and I stumble along, you know, oblivious of.
Well, Laura's not on this evening, but some of the work, as I said, the link to read that. And again, with the ideas, it's the first part is just a scoping of the interest, doing all that different costs. What does it take? You know, when you go for whether a community goes for an All-America City Award, or whether you're going for something like that, yeah, what is the cost and inputs and what's the return on the time and effort that's placed on that? And what does it mean? Clearly, it's much more than what it means to the conservation district per se. But I think for the general county, what does it do to lift this awareness of these great things that are happening for?
Maybe I was asleep if this was presented before, so perhaps. No.
Something to give a quick definition. Blue zones are areas in the world where studies have shown people routinely live much longer lives, sometimes over a century. And there have been some studies done to look at what are the factors in those areas that allow people to live that long. And it has to do with open space, diet, community involvement. There's a few things in there. And they're designated, I don't know why blue came into it, but they're designated blue zone. And that's coming in the United States in the last 10 years.
When Bell Helicopter, our tech scientists, their headquarters at Fort Worth, there's about 2,000 employees there. And Fort Worth went for that designation. And different parts of the community had to do certain things. For example, the city, and they made sure there were so many sidewalks. so that people could walk. You
Oh,
know, there's a whole bunch of metrics. I think they take random weights where people volunteer for weights from a selection group. And you see if the weight goes down, the smoking cessation programs. There's a whole number of things that go into it. And then some sort of outside agency determines whether or not they've achieved the status of blue. So it's kind of a neat thing, and you see the metrics improve.
Right.
And I know when we did it, that are within Textron, the healthcare costs of the employees at Fort Worth were twice that of the average for the rest of the country. So we bought into it as a company saying
Yes.
this will help because we had invested interest.
Wonderful. Thank you. I mean, I think that's the type of information that the board will need and certainly be provided. So that's great. Does anyone else have any comments about the strategic plan as presented? Okay.
So what we'll do with this is we'll bring it back next month just to accept. And again, it's a plan. It's an internal document, really. What this is it's our scorecard, report card, kind of what we're working towards, and then we'll report to the board on a quarterly basis. We've been discussing too, and I'm interested within board members. We as a staff discussed how we have presented strategic plan, tactical work in the past. What are some adjustments and changes that we think could be better to communicate to the board on a quarterly basis of status? But if there's any ideas or thoughts too, I'm open to hearing that and whenever we can present. So once this is adopted, accepted, then we would report on our work after Q2. So this fall, you get a report, because some of these things that are already in the first column obviously have been budgeted for this year already. They're in works, and that's why they made the plan very much, so they align very well.
Do we have any public comments?
There are none.
Have anything in the way of the executive director's report beyond?
I do,
Yeah, well,
and I've got a bunch of things here because there's a lot going on. It's summer, it's busy, 365 days a year here, but there's a lot. So just as a reminder, we do have our gathering with the county board and foundation tomorrow night at Pleasant Valley. We posted that as a gathering, 5 o'clock. Wear comfortable clothes, comfortable shoes, prepared. Again, thank you to Christy and the rest of the executive and leadership team. Everybody's been pitching in to prep and prepare for that. We'll begin, we'll gather, we'll eat, and then we'll have a presentation and actually 2 presentations. And then we'll head over and look at the bison.
Look at those bison.
So we're going to meet under the, in that outdoor
The shelter area.
shelter area, and then drive over to the bison.
Right, so we'll all gather there, drive all the way in, we'll eat, the restroom is there and everything else like that, and that should go well. So that, again, direction Christy did send out to the county and the foundations, everybody should be prepared for that.
How did you do on residents, RSVPs from the county? Did you get a good response?
Mostly, yes.
Yeah.
7, I have not heard anything from.
Okay.
But we're prepared for whoever shows up.
We're prepared.
7 out of 19, you know?
That was as of
12 out
yesterday.
19. Yeah.
That was it. Not bad.
So I think I've updated, we did have a trustee that has been moved forward onto the county. They'll approve next week. I did send out correspondence. I've already spoken. And I want to make sure I pronounce his name right. Weiss York. He is retired from Scott Forge. Human Resources was his area. And so we spoke today, set up the date for onboarding and orientation, and he will be joining us next Tuesday night for our meeting. Because there was a delay this year, normally they would have already been here at this meeting, kind of getting acclimated. But again, they had great response from when they reposted. We had, I believe, 6 or 7 candidates that applied, and listening to the interviews, they were all phenomenal. So really, really good selection to have and eager to come on the board. So that was great. We had the thank you to, we had our McCog outing and that went well, and we didn't do too bad. Lloyd carried us and Andy carried us, but But we did pretty good in that shared game and was able to get out there. So that was awesome. The few requests, I think I've shared with you directly with the Historical Society and Historical Preservation Commission, that once the new board is seated, that we gather a meeting with the historical community and just have some conversations on some other historical properties. I think that's great. Our historical areas beyond Howard's Walker are not open to the public, but those properties are taken care of. They have routine, mowings going on, the work that we can do. So those properties are under management for the ones that are left that we're protecting. So that's happening. And I think it'll be good, as I've asked the board, to go out and tour some properties if you're interested prior to go into that budget cycle, and just so there's an awareness in that meeting. Auditors have begun their process, so they are here working away for that. We have a hike with Mike tomorrow, on Saturday morning at Glacial Park. And that'll be curated, so anybody that wants to get that, they start at 9 o'clock, and the pedal lot. So the pedal lot, if you drive directly in, take a left, and it's the parking lot, kind of a trail of history. If you were to walk down towards the trail of history, that's the parking lot that will be getting that work. We've kicked off Find Your Wild, which has gone over amazingly well. And this is a kudos to our marketing and communications team on that. Stickers are available. And just to get the numbers here, just to show you how impressive, they have had 764 participants, have completed 6,666 missions since it started. And it started on Memorial Day. And so, wow, everybody's getting out, they're seeing sites that they haven't seen. So we're talking a big success for that. So kudos to Wendy and Caitlin and the entire team. The Great Outdoor Beer Trail. So if you haven't gotten your tickets, there's only 29 tickets left. That sold out within days. And so prices go up on August 1st. They'll most likely sell out before that date. So again, everything's filling up. Great interest and great work that we're doing. We're pushing this year a partnership with the foundation and Soulful Prairies for Soul Jam on September 9th. And tickets are $65. We really want to get everybody out there. Funds that are raised will be split between Environmental Defenders, the District Foundation, and then another third party, this food group. It's kind of like a McHenry County Ravinia, where you bring your own food. They do have 2 stages, 10 bands. And you bring your own picnic basket, wine and beer, and whatever they have at their time. And the money goes to a good cause.
Soulful Friends.
It's an olive.
Oh.
Yeah, so I'm very excited for this. It's the Good Food Pantry is the other third party. So if you want to, we buy your tickets before, and they also are suggesting that there's a code, McHenry County, or McHenry code, just to identify that they're coming in from us. But buy your tickets before they go off. Let's see here. Offices will be closed for the Juneteenth holiday. So thank you for that. We're registered, and anyone else, if you wish to be registered for the webinar on government efficiency, that's on June 27th at 11 a.m. with IEPD. So I will be attending that, but anybody else is more than welcome. We also, just to let the board know, if you read in the Wiki Wow, Maddie Neubauer, our marketing coordinator, is leaving the district. She is taking a job, a promotion as marketing manager for the city of Woodstock. And marketing coordinator, not marketing manager, it's a lateral move. But they're offering some additional money. So we're looking forward. GovHR study is in the works, and we will have something to present to the board back in August. But Maddie's been with us a short time, has done an amazing job. And we hate to see her go, but she's leaving on excellent terms. Several of our team members will be at the Special Districts Forum next week in McHenry County. John and Perry will be representing the district there. So they're bringing back hopefully a lot of great ideas and information for us. And the National Recreation Park Association will also be visiting McHenry County next week. So we'll be hosting ambassadors and past leadership of NRPA there in the Great Lakes area for oral history projects, and we want to showcase the district down there something that'll be down at the national conference. So that's happening as well. Another thing here, I'm giving you basically, I did give an update today, and thank you to John, my Director of Operations, Public Safety, on the Prairie Trail request for equestrian use, and I provided a reason. So if the board would like to discuss that, I've not had a follow-up phone call with the individual, but that is where we are landing, that the site is not appropriate for equestrian use.
Did you put that on the agenda?
I can, it's however the board wishes. I mean, I think for next month, if we want to officially just have a discussion and then make the determination. And that's all I have. I've given you, the updates.
I don't think horses and bicycles do well together.
Especially black top.
Experience, so yeah.
Well, we get the bicycles off.
Yeah.
The horse.
I wouldn't want to be on a horse when a bicycle came up.
Yeah.
No way.
I've ridden the Prairie Trail horseback, and the bicycles come up behind you, or it's, you know, there's a ditch on either side, and you wind up, you know, thrown in the bottom of the ditch.
It's right by my house. That's where we walk
Yeah.
almost daily. And, I think it's more frightening than the bikes would be. I haven't been around horse a long time, but when that train comes through, it scares the crap out of you. I mean, if you're not paying attention,
Wow.
I mean, because the train is right next to that
Yeah.
path for
Yeah.
miles and
Yeah.
miles, the train.
It's just an incompatible use there,
Comes-
so with time,
Yeah.
and I asked staff to do a quick assessment, they were down there, they reviewed it. I mean, it's got barbed wire, there's not a pathway, we've got e-bikes, it's just, it's no, it's just, I appreciate the interest, but that's where that is. And the last thing I did, I failed to mention, you know, June is Great Outdoors Month. We do have another national designation here in McHenry County. We send that information on June 3rd, which was National Trails Day. The Secretary of the Interior, Jim Hayland, did Fabulous Fox Water Trail is now an official national trail. And so again, thank you to our planning team. They worked to put signs up and making sure that we could meet the criteria that they could do. And so that brings another place. So we've got the National Wildlife Refuge, Habitat with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. Now we've got a National Park Service designation. And that's really great for the work that we do. And hopefully some resources will come, you know, as we continue on.
Elizabeth, thank you very much. I think our
Fishing and happy Father's Day this weekend, so.
So I think we need a motion to adjourn and then go into executive session. Or is it just a motion to go into executive session?
You need a
Just
motion.
going.
And to read the reasons why.
Okay, so I make a motion that we go into executive session pursuant to 2C5 lease purchase of real estate and 2C21 review of the Open Meetings Act 5 ILCS 120/1 at Sacred Road. And a second? Ask him to do the second.
Vice President Dom,
Yes.
Secretary Thomas,
Yes.
Trustee Zimmerman,
Yes.
Trustee Everard,
Yes.
President Cook,
Yes.
and Treasurer Fritz.
There'll be no action out of executive session this evening. So when we come back on, we will come back. Otherwise, we'll see you next. Thanks, everyone.
We need to take the roll.
Yes.
Good.
All right, so Secretary Thomas.
Yes.
Here. Trustee Zimmerman.
Yes.
Treasurer Fritz.
Yeah.
Trustee Everard.
Yes.
Vice President Dom.
Yes.
President Cook.
Yeah. Do we need one more motion?
I'll make that motion to adjourn.
Thanks. And Lloyd?
Okay. Vice President Dom.
Yes.
Secretary Thomas.
Yes.
Trustee Zimmerman.
Yes.
Treasurer Fritz.
Yes.
President Cook.
Yes.
And Trustee Everard.
Yes.
Thank you all.